Hey, welcome back to the 2003 Subaru Baja. Last time we didn't really do much, we just looked at the condition of the car itself, and some minor things here and there. The alternator wasn't working, but that should be fixed by now. And going forward, just to make things easier, I got that thing. So, this is just a list of what we have to do with the car for now, just what I've been able to gather. Actually, we're done that from the last video. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of stuff to do, because we still have to get through all of this. Today we're going to be going through the brakes, hopefully getting that ABS light at the same time, check engine light, which we know is the O2 sensor now. Hopefully we can get something done with the power steering. Headlight will come later. OBD port, maybe we'll be able to get that, but it's not really a priority. Windshield, gonna show you that one in a quick second. And rust is something that's gonna be for the end once I actually get some welding equipment. Without further ado, let's get back to the Baja. So, the first part to arrive is the O2 sensor, specifically the downstream one. This was diagnosed back when we first got the car through an OBD scanner. These are very helpful for quickly identifying any problems that the computer in the car picks up. Unfortunately for us, the OBD port barely works most of the time, and it was sheer luck that I was able to get a scan and quickly read the code. In this case, it was a P0037 code, which a quick Google search revealed it to be referring to a heated oxygen sensor heater control circuit low bank 1 sensor 2. In layman's terms, this is the much cheaper downstream unit. Good for me. There are ways to further diagnose the sensor, but I figured I could just replace it right away and save some headache. Oh boy, was I naive. Just for this job, I purchased a little kit for an assortment of sensor sockets, which included 2 for O2 sensors. There were others that you can get, and some even come with thread chasers to clean up the threads. I wonder why those are needed. It should be fine. After correctly identifying the O2 sensor, which can be done by looking at the connectors which are different for the downstream and upstream, I can start removing it. Just a couple minutes of awkwardly trying to reach that and it's disconnected. Nice. Now onto the sensor itself. This shouldn't take long, it's just unscrewing it. After using a ratchet, switching to a breaker bar, and a copious amount of WD-40, we finally managed to give up and start swapping the power steering as the parts have just arrived. We will not only replace the power steering pump itself, but the lines and reservoir as well. It's just a good idea to be safe, and also the old ones are starting to show some rust. The first thing to do is just remove the old pump. I do so by getting to the point where the belt is basically off. Then we can detach the hoses and connector wires. On this, it's just the high pressure line held on by a bolt, the reservoir hose held by a spring clamp, and the sensor connector, which is just pulled off. 2 12mm bolts are then unscrewed from the front, and then I can spend an embarrassing amount of time struggling with an impossible bolt before realizing that the bracket itself can be taken off. Thank you, YouTube. So, removing the alternator to gain access to said bracket reveals 3 more 12mm bolts. And once off, the whole assembly just pops right out. From there, the last bolt holding the pump is very easy to take off, and after some gentle taps with a mallet, we safely remove the pump. Yeah, it fell. It fell off the table I was working on. And of course I had to nick the only oil jug in the vicinity, causing it to leak a bit. Wonderful. After somewhat dealing with that, we can move on to cleaning up the bracket and getting the new pump on. This one comes with the pulley as well as a new sensor, so all that needs to be done is just transferring the pipe from the top that connects to the reservoir hose. That's quickly finished, so onto mounting it to the bracket. It's a bit of a tight fit, so we can use the same mallet to carefully tap it into place, slowly lining up each hole one at a time and adjusting until everything can be tightened down with a final pass. With that, we can attach it directly to the car. We can then move our attention to the reservoir, which, after disconnecting these two hoses, is just held on by a clip. This new reservoir should just be fine to go straight. And I dropped it. Also, turns out the filter inside is just loosely bouncing around and in fact looks different to the old one. This one is less important, so I decided to just keep the old one. Ideally, you do replace them because the filters get clogged, but if it works, it works. We do have a replacement hose for the pump connection, but none for the return hose, so that can stay on as well. With that done, we can move on to the lines themselves. Of course, this wouldn't be a Subaru if the connections weren't at an extremely awkward spot. Regardless, the high pressure line comes loose very easily and that one can be removed. The return line, however, is not as easy. I keep slipping off the nut. Before I can round it off, I decide to make the wise decision to buy a line wrench set to reduce the risk of destroying anything. And as well, they should be useful come time to work on brake lines. In addition to this, I purchased some PV blaster to try on that O2 sensor, but given what I see online and from acquaintances, we'll need some serious heat. Spraying on the PV and switching back to the lines, it comes loose and we are able to remove the second line. From here, the new lines can be installed. I start by lining up the hose connections to the pump and reservoir. Then line up the connections to the rack lines. The return goes pretty smoothly, but some much appreciated help from my dad allows me to easily get the other line connected. With those tightened down, all we need to do now is just fill up the reservoir and pump it through the system, bleeding all the air in the process. At first, the symptom is still there, but after a few wheel turns, the steering starts to become smoother. From here, we can quickly run the engine to get the pump cycling some fluid into the system. Then we fill the reservoir back up. Repeat this a couple times and the power steering is done. At least it should be. The next thing to do would be the brakes. But as we wait for those to come in, we can quickly figure out the situation with the OBD port. I was able to read the O2 sensor code, but it died before I could see if there were any others.
So when it comes to diagnosing the onboard diagnostic port, it's fairly simple just to make sure that everything's working properly. Here's your port, and here's a multimeter. If you connect your multimeter all the way to pin 16 right here, and then of course connect to a ground, what you should be reading is around 11 to 12 volts, let's just say. In our case, I wasn't reading anything. So,
checking all the fuses, I can't seem to find one specific to the port, and similar ones aren't bad. I want to get a good look at the wires coming into the port itself, so I can just quickly detach the port and it's working perfectly fine now. Yeah, I have no idea what I did to fix it, but after checking the back, I just blew into it and plugged the scanner in and it worked. So I just put it back in the slot and it seems to be just fine. On top of that, it only shows the one code for now, but at least we have it, so we can check for others that may pop up in the future. I'll take it. With the brakes finally arriving, we can move on to those. In the meantime, we can also deal with the ABS light. Lucky for us, Subaru makes things very, very easy to diagnose, because under the dash, a connector can be found alongside the ECU connectors. Nearby are two pins that can be used to diagnose the problem. I found the connector, but the pins are nowhere to be seen, but there is a suspicious loop here with 2 wires wrapped in electrical tape. Taking that off, and there we go. There are the pins. Perfect. Now, how do we use this? Well, it's made super simple, as all we need to do is plug one of the pins into pin slot 6 on the connector while the car is off. A more detailed video can be found in the description, and it's the one I used to figure this out. But once that is done, we can turn the key to the on position and look at the ABS light. It will flash on once and open with a long pause and one short pause. These can be read as numbers, with long pauses being 10s and shorts being 1s. So in this case, it opens up with 11, shows a code of 23, and closes with 11 before repeating. Another quick Google search reveals that this refers to the ABS sensor from the front left wheel. And that is the exact one we have here. Replacing that isn't too much of a big deal, so we head over to that given wheel and start taking it apart. I'm honestly not sure how I missed this the first time, but yeah, the connector is just cut here, and whoever did that wasn't kind enough to leave the bolt in. So one quick trip to the hardware store and we can get these brakes done. As stated before, the rotor seemed pretty alright for now, so we can just throw on some new pads and be done with that. I don't see myself needing to take these off anytime in the near future, and we should be good to go. Is what I would want to say, but after making sure to test all the brakes, I came to the realization that I am incredibly stupid. Let me explain. Back when we first checked out this car, one of the things I quote-unquote checked was the parking brake. Yeah, turns out it's not supposed to feel extremely loose. No worries, that can be easily fixed by adjusting the shoes themselves. Who am I kidding? You can't. Well, I can't, because there were none. So now I have to take them off, and what do I find? Well, that's the weird thing. I found nothing. Like, literally nothing. As in, all the parts were missing. The cable is cut, the rotor is basically kaput, and to cap things off, the backing plate is mangled. It seems whoever dealt with this last messed up the pin up here that holds the springs in place, and that is kind of important. It was probably done because the parking brake seized and they thought to just delete it entirely, but not in a proper way, so now I have to deal with it. That wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the fact that this is a Subaru from 2003.
And when it comes to that backing plate and hub assembly, this is the situation you end up with this thing right here being your backing plate, right there, sandwiched between the hub right here and the knuckle back here. You'll have 4 bolts located here on the hub, going all the way through like so. And what likes to build up is rust. A lot of rust. Likes to get stuck in there. Because in reality, what this hub is doing is it's sitting right into not only the backing plate, but also the knuckle itself. And because of that, rust likes to build up absolutely everywhere and just ruin the entire thing. Makes it a pain to get it out. There's also one little thing that will pose a problem later on. But this is the first issue.
pushing that aside, we'll go back to the O2 sensor instead. But this time, I've got a plan. I'll save you guys a load of time by just getting to the point. Heat is your friend. 22mm wrench is your friend. Hammer. Here's what I did. Mangle the old O2 sensor. You're replacing it anyways, right? Apply some serious heat to it. In our case, I only had a propane torch, which seemed to do the trick just enough. I've seen it online that you can run the engine for a while or go on a 30-minute drive, but for me that is way too sketchy, as that heats the entire exhaust, and that spells trouble when dealing with a less than cooperative part such as the O2 sensor. So, using the propane torch, I heat the area of the threads for a bit and then put an ice cube to quickly cool and hopefully crack the rust, in a sense. According to a forum post I found on this issue, it seems that it can also protect the threads a bit. I'm not sure how valid that statement is, but that's besides the point. Repeat for a couple of times and then take your wrench and hammer the hell out of it. In my case, it came loose in just a few taps, which is amazing. Ensure that you don't force the sensor though. Carefully wiggle it back and forth, tighten and loosen with the aid of some penetrator fluid to clear the threads as best as possible. You really do not want to mangle these up. Just like that, the sensor is out. Before putting in the new one though, it's a good idea to chase the threads of the converter, just so that you can avoid these issues in the future. So just like that, the O2 sensor is in, and the check engine light hasn't appeared since.
So yeah, I'd say it was pretty successful with most things considered. The parking brake's definitely going to be a major pain in the butt to deal with. At least we were able to get it done with the OBD port. The steering wheel is less stiff. It's still binding at parts, which is going to be fun to figure out later on. And yeah, the ABS light is gone. So I'd say that's pretty good. There's not much else to really say. Just been trying to get through this car. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot, but slowly but surely it'll get on the road. I don't know when that'll be, but things are starting to move along, let's just say.
And that brings us to the end of the video. With things coming along and more parts on the way, this project just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope to see you again sometime in the future. Till then, take care.